Elderly coworker's creepy behavior made me report him after he hugged a young staff member from behind, sparking multiple complaints. I'm a 27-year-old woman working as a line cook at a large barbecue restaurant chain. Everyone in this story will have fake names. There's an older man I work with named Ken. He's in his 70s and works in our dining room, not as a server, but as a dining room host. His job is to interact with customers, bus tables, and make sure supplies are stocked up. Ken is also a pastor and he's extremely friendly with our customers, having built a lot of relationships with regulars. He's generous and considerate, too. At the end of each night, when we have leftover food, Ken wraps it up and donates it to local fire and police stations. Whenever Ken goes on trips, he brings back little gifts for everyone, especially the girls. Things like souvenir bracelets, or something that matches our interests, a college shirt for someone in college, a sports cap, a drink, or even a cool pen. Always something thoughtful. He's particularly friendly with all the young women who work at our store. Ken always insists on hugs, and that includes me. He gives tight squeezes, looks straight into my eyes to tell me how beautiful I am, how much he loves seeing me. Sometimes he even presses his cheek against mine. It leaves me feeling deeply uncomfortable. It's gotten to the point that if I see Ken coming, I'll find the dirtiest job to do just so he won't touch me, or I'll avoid him altogether to get out of the hugs. I mentioned to a couple people at work that Ken kind of gives me the creeps, but it looked like I was the only one bothered by him. The other girls seemed to enjoy Ken's hugs. They smiled, hugged him back, and chatted happily. I never heard anyone else say they were uncomfortable, so I chalked it up to me just being weird, maybe not used to genuinely nice people. I did my best to dodge Ken and just got on with it. Then, last week, everything changed. Sydney, our 18-year-old prep cook, is tall, thin, and honestly a stunning girl. After closing, with 4 people watching, Ken walked up behind Sydney and pulled her into a tight hug from behind. Out of nowhere, he just grabbed her and pressed their bodies close. Sydney's face plastered into a shocked expression and she nervously laughed it off. As soon as Ken left the building, our closing lead asked her if she was alright, because that was just weird. Everyone who watched was shocked and said so. Sydney said she was okay, although being grabbed like that made her uncomfortable. Still, she shrugged it off. But I found out later she felt just as uncomfortable around Ken as I did. She simply thought rejecting his affection would make her look rude, so she played along. I couldn't stop thinking about it all night. The next day, I saw one of our upper managers and told him what happened. He was just as shocked and promised to take care of it immediately. The managers had a weekly meeting and brought Ken up. That's when it came out that our morning prep cook, Val, also felt extremely uncomfortable around Ken. She said he always hugged her from behind, wrapping his arms around her chest, and would sniff her hair. If Val ever tried to give him a side hug or said no, Ken would guilt trip her with, "Oh, are you not my friend anymore? Or so you don't like me now?" I had no idea she was dealing with this too. Val doesn't speak English very well, but she confided all this to a bilingual manager. Ken has shown other red flags as well. We have 2 regulars who are the textbook definition of creepy, guys in their 50s, scraggly with balding hair and patchy beards. They have a close relationship with Ken, and they come in almost every evening to sit and talk with him, sometimes staying even after we close. One night back in April, they managed to pull our 17-year-old cashier into their booth and brag to her about liking to sleep with women too young for him to even date. They spent the rest of that night staring at our 19-year-old cashier, smiling and laughing. I went to the front and just stood between them and her so she wouldn't have to deal with their gazes. I told every manager in the store they needed to handle it immediately. Management intervened, spoke with the men, and put new rules in place so only managers serve them. They barely show up anymore. Ken's reaction to this disgusting incident? He just laughed and said, "You know how people are, acting like nothing happened," and kept right on joking and buddying up with those creeps as if nothing was wrong. That evening stuck with me, and Ken's reaction is what made my gut feeling about him so negative. Everyone else in the restaurant was completely disgusted and shocked, but Ken brushed it off. Currently, Ken's on vacation and won't return until next week. One of my managers met with me one-on-one and thanked me for reporting the incident with Sydney, saying that now more people like Val were coming forward with their stories about Ken. The manager assured me that when Ken comes back, management will handle it. That made me feel better about speaking up, but there's still this nagging feeling that I may have overreacted, that maybe it's not as big as my gut tells me, and that I'm possibly ruining the reputation of someone seen as a beloved, helpful man. So, am I the asshole? Update 1. I've worked 3 shifts with Ken since the last incident, and so far, he hasn't attempted to hug me again. There's still this weird tension in the air between us, but I make sure to keep my guard up every time we're scheduled together. When Ken came back from vacation, he showed up with small souvenirs, keychains for everyone, each with our names on them. It seemed like he was trying to win some goodwill back. I paid close attention when he handed Sydney her keychain. He didn't touch her, which was a relief, but he did stand uncomfortably close enough that I immediately moved a little closer myself, just to make sure he didn't try anything. I kept an eye on him the whole time, ready to step in at the first sign of trouble, but fortunately, he just handed her the keychain and walked away. Monday night was a different kind of uneasy. The creepy customers came in again, just like clockwork, and set up camp from about 5:30 p.m. until we closed at 9. I could feel the whole staff bracing themselves for another awkward evening. Thankfully, our male manager took their order right away, which meant none of us younger employees had to interact with them at all. That was a relief. Of course, Ken spent most of the night sitting and talking with these guys, looking perfectly comfortable with them while the rest of us avoided their corner of the restaurant like it was on fire. If anything else happens, I'll update again. For now, I'm just staying cautious and watching out for everyone. Update 2. Ken hasn't exactly insisted on hugging me lately, but he's found new ways to make my skin crawl at work. Thursday night, I was just minding my business, filling up my drink at the machine, when Ken walks by, says hi, and gives me a little fist bump. Fine, whatever, I can tolerate a fist bump even though I don't love it. But then, as I turn back to refill my cup, suddenly Ken is right behind me. I actually turned straight into his armpit, that's how close he was. He was reaching over my head, fidgeting with something on the top of the drink machine, so close I had to jump back, completely startled. Why? Why did he need to be that close, reaching over me out of nowhere? Later, when I had a moment to really look at the machine, I saw that there's literally nothing up there at all. No vents, no buttons, nothing. The whole thing is just flat, covered by a protective texture. There was absolutely no reason for him to be up there like that. It was deliberate, just sneaking up right behind me so I couldn't even move without backing into him. Then, I found out he's still at it with Val. She used to get hugs, now it's side hugs, but he's still pushing boundaries. If she tries to say no, he pouts and says things like, "You don't like me anymore." And Val barely speaks English. Ken absolutely targets her because he figures she won't be able to say anything that will get him in trouble or that she'll be easily dismissed. Our managers actually met about it again on Friday. There were 4 of them, except the manager I first reported everything to is out on medical leave, which worried me. Luckily, our bilingual lead, who Val is able to communicate with fully, and the kitchen manager were there. They both fought for something to be done about Ken. But we have this new manager, only been with us for a few weeks, and her take? Oh, he's just being Ken. He's an old man. Thank God some of the others pushed back on that. But then, later that same evening, my GM was about to leave when Ken arrived. They had this casual conversation, laughing about the football game from the night before. Ken said he was jealous, and my GM joked, "Oh, I'll have to take you to one with me sometime." And I stood there, completely deflated. That same day, they'd talked about his harassment in a meeting, and now my GM is just chit-chatting, inviting him out, like nothing happened. I can't help but feel like nothing is ever going to change. I've started applying for other jobs, because I just can't afford to quit outright. I have to find something else first. I've thought about going over my GM's head, talking to their boss directly, but honestly, I have no idea how I'd even get in touch. For now, all I can do is hope something changes, but it's hard to hold on to that hope when this is what I face every day. Update 3. Val finally stood up to Ken. She enlisted the help of our bilingual coworker to clearly tell Ken that she doesn't want to be touched or hugged, that she doesn't like any kind of physical contact and that he needs to stop. She also told him they could absolutely be friends, just without any touching. Amazingly, since then, I haven't heard any new reports of him making advances or trying to touch her. That alone made me feel a surge of relief and happiness. But then this morning, I decided to ask my general manager if he'd had any further talks with Ken about the way he's been making us uncomfortable. He just looked at me, almost blank, and said, "I didn't know there was more that happened. Is there new stuff?" I stood there, honestly just baffled. I had personally spoken to my kitchen manager and to our other manager, the bilingual one, each of whom told me the same story, that everything that had been going on had been discussed in the Friday meeting, and the response from leadership had been along the lines of, "Ken is just an old man, he's just being Ken." Both of these managers told me they pushed back, insisting that something more needed to be done than just vaguely bringing it up in meetings. So, it was pretty clear, my GM was lying straight to my face. I called him out right there. "You guys literally had a meeting about this on Friday," I said, not backing down. He tried to brush it off and said, "There was a meeting but nobody made me aware of anything going on." He even implied that, if someone told me otherwise, they were lying. Then he wanted to know if there was anything specific that had happened lately. I started telling him about how Val had to have our coworker translate to Ken that he needed to stop touching her after he ignored the first warning. But as I was getting those words out, the catering manager cut me off. She looked at me like I was completely overreacting and said, "You need to give Ken the benefit of the doubt. Yes, he's touchy-feely, but he's a minister and he comes from a generation that likes to touch people, he doesn't know any better." The combination of the look she gave me and her words hit me like a punch. When I get angry, my body betrays me and I start tearing up. I excused myself and headed to the bathroom just to calm down and pull myself together. About 10 minutes later, the catering manager found me and said, "I didn't mean to upset you. If there's anything going on, I'll protect you. Please know that." I just told her I didn't want to talk about it anymore. Deep down, I felt like she was trying to cover herself, not me. I had to go back to the bathroom again just to catch my breath and calm down before we opened for the day. Later, my GM told me that if anything else happened, I should push back directly and correct Ken myself, and then come to him, the GM, or text him directly about the incident. I'm putting out job applications as fast as I can. So far, I haven't heard anything back and I just can't afford to quit right now, even though every part of me wants to. This week, I'm planning to talk to some of the other women I work with. I need to know if they have stories of their own, and maybe even go to my GM's boss with all of this, including those infuriating comments that were made to me this morning. I have a shift with Ken tonight, so we'll see how things play out. Update 4. It felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders now that actual action is finally being taken. To be honest, the relief is mixed with a bit of frustration, because I recently discovered that another girl I worked with, Caitlin, had also been touched and even sniffed by Ken. Hearing her story, I realized that Ken hadn't stopped his behavior even after management supposedly spoke to him weeks ago. I can't begin to describe how angry I was that it took so long for our concerns to be treated seriously, but at least now it's finally happening, just like I hoped it would, weeks ago. Knowing I'm not alone in this, that Caitlin went through the same awful experiences, hurts, but it also brought a sense of validation to my worries. Unless something truly wild happens, this will probably be the last update I share about this ordeal. I'm genuinely grateful to everyone who shared advice or simply made me feel heard and valid in my concerns. Update 5. I really thought I was done. Then yesterday happened. I was halfway through cracking eggs for cornbread when two people in business clothes walked straight through the kitchen like they owned the place. A woman with a silver bob and a man with a tablet. They asked for our GM by name, then asked him to step out of the office. The woman introduced herself as HR from corporate and the guy was the regional. They set up in the office, shut the door, and started calling us in one by one. No warning, no heads up. I went in third. The HR woman had a stack of printouts, timestamps, schedule copies, even stills from camera footage. She didn't accuse, she just asked very specific questions, where I was standing by the drink machine, what time Ken handed out souvenirs, whether anyone had translated for Val, if I'd ever seen him touch anyone by the expo line. She already knew the answers. When I mentioned the Friday meeting where it got brushed off as just Ken, she didn't blink. She wrote the exact phrase down, repeated it back to me, and asked me to initial beside it. Val went in with our bilingual coworker and stayed a while. When they came out, she gave me this tiny nod that told me everything I needed to know. Caitlin followed. Sydney, too, someone had called her in early. The GM tried to hover and HR told him, without looking up, we need privacy. He left and I caught him staring at the floor by the mop sink, chewing his lip like it owed him money. They pulled camera footage while we were open. The regional sat on a milk crate in dry storage with the tablet cradled in his hands, scrubbing back and forth, pausing, pointing. The weirdest part was how quiet the building felt. The lunch rush never showed the way it usually does. We all worked around the slow, heavy air like the restaurant had dropped a few degrees. Ken came in mid-afternoon, early for his shift. He walked through the front door smiling like always, carrying a little paper bag with "For My Crew" written on it. The HR woman met him at the host's stand. He tried to crack a joke about being called to the principal's office, and she cut him off with, "We need to talk in back." They went to the office. 10 minutes later the door opened and he stepped out without his apron. The bag of treats was still in his hand. He asked if he could say a quick prayer with the team and the regional said, "No. No, Edge, just no." Ken stood there for a second, looking for a landing, and when he didn't find one, he walked out. While all that was happening, the creeps came in. 5:30 on the dot, like they set their watches to aggravating people. Our kitchen manager met them at the door and told them they weren't being served tonight. One of them tried to make a joke about religious persecution. I wish I were kidding, and then the taller one leaned in and started with, "We've known Ken for." He didn't get to finish. The regional stepped up from the side and said, "Gentlemen, corporate has issued a trespass for both of you. If you don't leave I'll have to call the police." They puffed up, then deflated. They walked out, but not before the short one did that slow turn and stared at Sydney through the window like it was a movie. The regional stepped directly into his sightline and he finally got the message. We closed without Ken for the first time in months. It felt like someone had taken a heavy ring of keys off the end of a belt. That constant jangly awareness was just gone. I walked out with Sydney and Val and our dishwasher, and we did this dumb little victory lap around the parking lot, checking the shadows like always, and then realized we didn't actually have to. This morning HR called me personally. She thanked me for cooperating, said she couldn't share every detail, but confirmed action had been taken for violations of conduct and harassment policy. Ken is no longer scheduled. It was framed in that corporate way where they don't say the word fired, but they didn't have to. They also told me there will be mandatory training rolled out next week and a new, written no contact policy posted in the break room, in English and Spanish. I asked if my GM had been informed when the Friday meeting happened. The HR woman paused for a beat and said, "Leadership expectations have been addressed at the store level." That was the most polite sentence I've ever heard that still sounded like a thunderclap. The paper bag with "For My Crew" was still sitting on the shelf by the time clock had opened. Someone finally opened it. Inside were little laminated bookmarks with Bible verses and a sticky note stuck to the top that just said "Smile More," in his handwriting. I don't know why, but that rattled me more than anything. Not the worst thing he's done, not by a mile, but the way it felt like a parting shot, a tacky little bow on behavior we've been choking down. I've got an interview at a small place across town on Thursday. I'm still going. Even with the air feeling lighter, it's hard to unlearn months of bracing. I want to like my job again. I want to eat my staff meal without scanning the dining room for a man twice my age who thinks my cheeks are public property. Today I filled my cup at the drink machine and didn't jump. That alone felt like proof something actually shifted. Sydney hugged me in the parking lot when we clocked out. A real hug, the kind you choose. She laughed and said, "You smell like smoke and cornbread." I told her she did too. Val smiled and showed me her phone. She'd set a reminder in Spanish that pops up at the end of every shift, "No caminar sola." Don't walk alone. We grabbed our bags and left together. I threw the keychain he gave me in the junk drawer by the spice scales a while back. Today I fished it out. It's still got my name on it. I clipped it to the back door key. If someone wants to know when we decided the line between friendly and predatory was a line worth drawing, I'll point at that key and say, "Here. Right here." Update 6. Training showed up like a delivery truck, early, unannounced, and with a squeak in the wheels. The HR woman with the silver bob rolled a cart into the dining room before the breakfast crew finished setting the tea urns. A second woman I didn't know had a stack of clipboards and a little Bluetooth speaker that kept announcing connected in a robot voice. They taped a new poster to the wall by the time clock, English on the left, Spanish on the right, same font as the allergy chart. No contact policy. Someone had gone crazy with a laminator. There were sample phrases in both languages. How to say no. How to hear no. How to keep your hands to yourself in a space where people move fast. The bilingual lead stood at the front with a mic she didn't need and translated as they went, not word for word, but better. Val sat 2 chairs in front of me, and when the HR woman asked for a volunteer to practice saying no thanks, not today, Val lifted her chin and said, "No me tokes, por favor," clear as a bell. People clapped. Not polite clapping. Like someone just hit a home run. I felt something loosen in my chest I didn't realize was still knotted. The GM stood in the back by the soda bibs with his arms crossed and this practiced neutral face that read like shrink wrap. Every time the HR woman said leadership, his eyes did this tiny tick. At the end she had us sign acknowledgement sheets and handed out wallet cards with the hotline and a QR code. English on one side, Spanish on the other. She slid a second sheet across to the GM, same carbon paper I signed for deliveries, and asked for his keys. No announcement. No drama. He unclipped them, every key ringing together, and put them in her palm. He left through the side door like he was slipping out for a smoke. An hour later a woman named Marcy from a sister store in the next city walked in wearing black non-slips and a baseball cap. She introduced herself, tied on an apron, and started changing light bulbs above the back door before she touched the schedule. "You all can walk me through your close later," she said, and I believed her. They installed a convex mirror over the drink machine. It's small, like half a grapefruit, and now when you walk up for ice you can see the whole space behind you in a little silver bubble. Somebody stuck a magnet shaped like a pig on the edge of the no contact poster. The pig is smiling. Its snout points at the Spanish paragraph like it's reading along. The meat delivery guy laughed when he saw it and asked if we got new code violations. "Better," I said. "New rules." The creeps try to get clever. A 1-star popped up on our Google page that afternoon, written by Hungry Pastor 777, complaining about persecution and cold service from hostile young women. The regional must have notifications turned on, because the response from corporate landed 10 minutes later and read like a wet slap. "We maintain a harassment-free environment for guests and staff. Individuals who violate that will not be served." Somebody screenshotted it and a little cheer went up in the dish pit. The dishwasher printed it on the label printer and stuck it to the mop sink. He spelled harassment with 2 R's and 3 S's and it made the whole thing perfect. Ken tried to come in as a customer. Sunday after church crowd, 2 o'clock. He was in a button-up I'd never seen him wear to work, a tie with tiny little doves on it, and he had a woman with him in a floral dress, late 60s, hair sprayed into a helmet. He held the door for her and then stood there like he expected the building to bow. Marcy walked to the host stand with a folded piece of paper in her hand. "Sir, you're not permitted on this property," she said, calm as if she were telling him we were out of ribs. He smiled like she'd just misheard him. "I think there's a misunderstanding," he said. She handed him the paper, formal trespass notice with our store number at the top and the regional manager's signature at the bottom. He asked if he could speak to his team. She pointed at the door. The floral dress woman started to say something about forgiveness and grace. Marcy said, "Ma'am, you're welcome to come back without him. Today we can prepare your order to go if you'd like." The whole exchange took 30 seconds and felt like a door that had been stuck forever finally sliding on its track. He didn't make a scene. He left. The paper went into the manager book. The line kept moving. I went to the interview across town on Thursday. Small place, open kitchen, chalkboard menu that changes with the weather. The owner is a woman named Tasha with tattoos of herbs up both forearms, rosemary on her left, thyme on her right. She gave me tasks instead of questions: cut onions, grill a chicken breast, plate a sandwich without it looking like it fell. She watched the way I salted, not just how. We talked while I worked. I told her I do barbecue smoke like a second language. I didn't tell her anything else. She didn't ask. I walked out smelling like butter and onions and would smoke anyway. That night she texted with an offer and a starting pay that made my eyes sting in a new way. 2 weeks notice okay? She wrote. I sat on the milk crate by dry storage and counted my fingers like that would help me think. The restaurant felt warm, not heavy. Sydney was singing under her breath while she wrapped cornbread, off-key and happy. Val brought me a paper boat with a piece she'd cut too big for a customer and said, "Parati." The convex mirror over the drink machine flashed a little silver crescent of my own smile back at me. I said yes to Tasha. I told Marcy I'd give them my last day and help train whoever they threw on grill. She nodded and shook my hand like I was moving to a new house 2 streets over, not leaving for good. We held our first closing meeting under Marcy. 5 minutes, no speeches. 2 to a car if you park on the back fence, she said. Text me when you make it home if you closed. The bilingual lead repeated it. Sydney rolled her eyes in a kid way and then looped her arm through mine. When we went out, the back lot felt normal. Not safe forever. Just normal. The floodlight over the dumpster that had been burned out since July flicked on when we walked by like it had been waiting for an audience. On my second to last shift, a family of regulars came in. Mom, Dad, little girl with a cow print purse. They used to wave at Ken. The mom came to the counter to ask for more pickles and then leaned in like she was going to ask for extra sauce and said, "Lo, thank you." I didn't ask what for. I just nodded. She took the pickles and went back to her table and tucked a napkin into her daughter's collar like armor. The bookmarks in the bag by the time clock stayed untouched all week. Finally, the dishwasher fished one out and used it as a wedge to level the wobbly leg on the prep table. It fit perfectly, a tiny verse holding up a table that feeds people. I stared at it for a second and then went back to cracking eggs. The world didn't tilt. It stayed exactly where it was supposed to be. Update 7. The first sign something was brewing wasn't a person, it was the phone. It started ringing at 9:03 and didn't stop. The host stand looked like a pinball machine. Unknown numbers, blocked numbers, a couple with caller ID that read things like God's Army Ministries. Are you the place that hates pastors? Do you deny grace? Marcy planted herself by the handset and said the exact same sentence each time like she was laying bricks. We don't discuss personnel. We serve guests. We enforce our policies. She hung up. The line lit again. Our dishwasher slid the phone base off the counter and jammed the cord into the fax jack on the old printer. The next call hit and the printer made that dying alien dial-up scream and spit a blank page. We all startled and then started laughing because it sounded like the building was trying to eject a ghost. At lunch, a video started making the rounds. A shaky clip of our front door. A woman in a denim vest narrating in a breathy whisper that they won't seat a man of God while she pointed the camera at our no-contact poster like it was a crime scene. You couldn't see the part where Ken had already been served. You couldn't see the trespass. Somebody had put a soft focus filter on it that made the edges of our windows glow. At 2:40, a white bus pulled into the far end of the lot like it was trying not to be seen and failing. The side said New Hope Full Gospel in blue script. People stepped down in neat little pairs, women in floral, men in khaki, the whole shape of a church potluck without the casserole dishes. They didn't come in all at once. They drifted like they were trying to be casual about being coordinated. One woman stuck a pamphlet in the door handle and Marcy was there in 3 steps, took it out, handed it back, and said, "No solicitation." The woman blinked like she didn't know what that meant and then tucked it in her purse. We didn't stop service. We weren't going to make a theater out of it. Marcy set the tone by doing something stupidly normal. She grabbed a pair of tongs and fished a lemon out from under the ice in the tea bin and said, "Someone needs to stop tossing garnishes where they don't belong," and then looked at me and smiled like she'd caught me stealing cookies. The regional had sent a security guy, plain black polo, earpiece, the kind you only notice if you're looking for him. He sat at a 2-top by the door with a to-go cup and a receipt under his elbow. He didn't blink much. They tried to sing. That's the part that would sound made up if I hadn't watched it with my own eyes. The soft hum of Amazing Grace starting by the soda machine like someone had flicked on a radio. It wasn't loud. It was just pointed. The security guy stood up and said, "You're welcome to eat. You're not welcome to disrupt service." He had the cadence of someone who has said those exact words before. They sat. They ordered. Their server was a manager. No one came near Sydney. No one came near Val. One of the men reached an arm out like he was going to touch the shoulder of a busser carrying a tub and the whole line of people behind the counter said corner. At the same time, it hit like a bell. He pulled his hand back like he'd touched a grill. Ken didn't come inside. He stood across the property line by the chain link, under the only tree that still has leaves, in a white shirt and that dove tie. He held a paper grocery bag and looked like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. Every time someone came out, he perked up, and every time it wasn't one of us, he deflated. The security guy called someone without looking like he made a call. 10 minutes later a cruiser rolled past slow, didn't stop, kept going. Ken looked at the pavement, then at the bus, then at the tree, then left. The bag was still under his arm. The reviews kept popping up like mold. 1 star, 1 star, 1 star. Cold staff. Anti-Christian policy. The corporate replies landed like they were set to a metronome. We do not tolerate harassment. We wish you well at other dining options. The bilingual lead translated a couple out loud to Val and she laughed so hard she had to lean against the reach-in for balance. He tried mail next. An envelope showed up the following morning addressed in loop-to-loop cursive to my work family. No return address. Marcy handed it to me with tongs like it was raw chicken. Inside were 8 tracts, a photocopied letter about forgiveness, and a Polaroid of our crew from last Christmas, the one where half of us had on reindeer antlers and the other half didn't because we were working the smoker. Ken had written joy across the white border in gold paint pen. Taped to the corner was a tiny sticker that said smile more, in the same handwriting as the bookmarks. My stomach did that elevator drop. Marcy took one look at my face, slid the whole thing into a clear zip bag, wrote the date on the top with a Sharpie, and put it in the safe. Chain of custody, she said. If he reaches out again, we want it recorded. She didn't ask if I wanted to keep the picture. She knew I didn't. By dinner, the bus was gone, regular people filtered in, and I caught sight of the convex mirror over the drink machine. You can see almost the whole dining room in that little silver hemisphere now. It makes everyone look smaller and rounder and weirdly kinder. Sydney likes to make faces at it when she thinks no one is watching. She did a bug-eye thing at me while the tea was brewing and then went back to rolling spoons. The air felt normal. Corporate went bigger than our 4 walls. An email hit the manager tablet with a subject line that might as well have been thunder. Customer behavior bans, regional. The creeps' names were there. Full. All locations within 60 miles. A note for us to call the on-call number if someone we'd personally trespassed popped up at a sister store. The idea that we could look out for each other past the parking lot lines did something good to my ribcage. In the middle of the week, the locksmith showed up. 2 cans of graphite spray and a ring of new keys that chimed like a tiny wind chime when he walked. He took the back door lock apart on a towel like he was operating on it. Whoever rekeyed this last time did a rush job, he said, which is the locksmith version of your last haircut was a crime. He put the new cylinder in, tested it, then handed me a key with a blue rubber cap and said, try it. I slid it in and turned and the bolt slid like butter. I clipped it on the keychain with my name from Ken anyway. The wrong gift holding the right door. The irony didn't burn. It landed. I went to Tasha's place one morning before my shift to sign paperwork and ended up staying an hour because she wanted me to taste sauces. A Carolina that hit like vinegar lightning. A peach mustard that ate sweet and then swung savory a half second later. The kitchen there is a rectangle, long and bright, everything within reach. We stay behind even when we're alone, she said. We say you good? And we mean it. I don't do surprises that touch people. She said it so casually I had to grip the edge of her butcher block for a second. I nodded like I was fine. I was fine. I just had a lot of extra air. My last week became a parade of ordinary that felt holy. The meat guy dropped a box and apologized to the box. Val stuck a tiny heart sticker next to the Spanish line on the no contact poster and no one peeled it off. The pig magnet got a second magnet friend, a calf, and now it looks like a little farm is reading policy. Sydney drew a cartoon of the convex mirror on a napkin and taped it to the corner of the actual mirror so it looks like the mirror is smiling at itself. The day before my last, a woman came in with a notebook and a microphone cord wrapped around her wrist. Local news, not the station that chases car wrecks, the one that does school board meetings and high school band features. She asked for a statement. Marcy said, we enforce policy, we feed people, we keep our staff safe, like she was reading it off a placemat, and the woman nodded like that was what she wanted all along. She filmed the poster. She filmed hands cutting brisket. She filmed Val laughing with the bilingual lead and the cameras didn't make her shrink. That night, the segment aired and cut between the poster, a close-up of tongs grabbing ribs, a shot of our front door, and Ken's Facebook post blurred out except for the words witch hunt, which looked stupid and small on a TV screen with closed captions on. On my actual last shift, I wrote the cornbread recipe out from memory on the back of a prep sheet for the new kid and drew a little arrow next to don't overmix or it will sulk. We closed to the sound of the bread delivery truck backing up, a beep that used to set my teeth on edge. That night it sounded like a metronome for the world staying in rhythm. We did the lap of the back lot like we always do now. Due to a car, Marcy said, and then she hugged me with both arms with her hands visible and asked, consent? Like a joke that deserved an answer. I said yes and hugged her back because that's the whole point. When I turned my back door key in for the last time, I unclipped the blue cap and the name keychain and left the metal bear on the hook. The tag with my name is in my pocket now, next to the new place's fob on a little ring that smells faintly like rosemary because of Tasha's arms. I don't know if I'll keep it. I don't know if I'll throw it in a drawer and forget it exists and then find it 8 apartments later and feel my throat close. Right now it just feels like a label I reclaimed. This morning I stood at the drink machine at my new job to fill a water and caught my reflection in the convex mirror we don't have. Habit. The wall just stared back. No silver bubble. No wide-angle truth. Tasha walked past me, said behind, and didn't reach for anything over my head. I didn't flinch. I salted by feel. I grilled a chicken breast until the juices ran clear. I plated a sandwich so it didn't look like it fell. A kid with a cow print purse bit in and made a noise like something satisfied leaving her body. I went to wash my hands and realized I wasn't rehearsing a response to a touch that might come. I'm not saying everything is fixed. I'm saying I cracked eggs and the world did not tilt. I put the first ticket of my first day into the rail and it slapped home with that nice little click and I felt it all the way up my arms.